What is up, team? Welcome back to the Red Storm Rapid Reaction Podcast. I'm Pat Kane. That's Cole Ladshaw. And less than a week has passed since our last transfer commit, Uzziah Sellers, came to St. John's. Today, big news. Ian Jackson, former McDonald's All-American and UNC transfer, has committed to St. John's. The first McDonald's All-American in a couple decades to come to St. John's. Big news to help celebrate Cole on his birthday today. Cole, how you feeling?
Best birthday present I could ask for. Rick Pitino, Matt Abdelmassi, Father Shanley, transfer portal heroes. Like, Mike Rapoli, thanks for spending the big bucks. Like, it's insane. I can't believe we're again ranked second currently in 247's transfer portal rankings. Ian Jackson, the 8th overall player in this class currently. Just absolutely insane talent. Like you mentioned, McDonald's All-American, 5-star kid. Had a up and down season at North Carolina. I don't think very highly of Hubert Davis, but North Carolina had their struggles. Ian kind of struggled at times to find a role. Had an insane stretch of 7 games where he was absolutely on fire, carrying that team, averaging over 22.4 points per game. I think that was when they had their only quad 1 win of the season at his new home of Madison Square Garden against UCLA. He had 24 points in that game. Ian is an insane talent. I'm not sure. Rick Pitino seems to think that he's going to be playing point guard for us, to be determined, but just an incredible talent, and I can't be happier on my birthday.
Yeah, Rick was not shy in proclaiming Ian as the next point guard that he's found and brought into St. John's. Rick is not one to always be the most careful of choosing his words and sometimes get out too far ahead of himself. And you got to be sure not to take everything 100% as truth, and to put some heavy grains of salt behind what he says. And perhaps Ian wants to have the ball in his hands, and that could have been part of the sell. And I'm sure there is some truth to that, and he'll get the ball in his hands to be able to prove himself there. But I would be really surprised if the goal is to have Ian be your point guard 100% of the time. He's too valuable as a scorer away from the ball to take that away from him as some options as well, but, to be determined. And, Cole, you mentioned right now we have the number 2 transfer class coming in. That only takes into account what's coming into your program. It's important that we also do note we lost another transfer this weekend. Simeon Wilcher decided to transfer out, the sophomore. Previously highly sought after, highly ranked recruit, a starter for us, a guy who, was a big part in turning around our culture. So I wish Sim nothing but the best. Thank him for his time here. Hopefully he can land on his feet, get to a spot where he can really showcase his skills, and have a successful junior and senior season.
Yeah, you hope Sim finds a good home that fits for him and what he's trying to accomplish. You can't necessarily blame the kid. I mean, we've in essence brought in 3 starting caliber shooting guards in this transfer portal season between Uzziah Sellers, Jason Sin, and now Ian Jackson. So, was that going to cut into Sim's minutes? Undoubtedly. I think it's hard, and it's just the current state of transfer portal. Like, these kids are going to want to A, get paid, and B, have minutes to be able to maximize their goals and their careers in college basketball. You wanted to see Sim and the team work it out and for him to stick around for 4 years, but unfortunately, again, with all the talent we have coming in, I can't necessarily blame Sim for leaving. But again, like you said, you wish him nothing but the best, and hopefully he finds a good home, and he'll always be a Johnny to me.
Yeah, I can't blame any party, I can't blame Sim for wanting to be in the spot that best fits him, gives him the best chance to showcase his skills, or perhaps get paid more. And I can't blame Coach Pitino for bringing in guards he thinks are going to make the team better. And if those guys weren't as good as Sim, then Sim could have stayed and battled for minutes and proven to be better. And if they are better than Sim, then Coach Pitino is trying to make the roster better. So I don't put fault on either party. Of course, like you said, you get attached to guys. You want to see them finish their careers here at St. John's. It's tough to see guys like Sim go. I'm going to remember him as being a guy who was as absolutely passionate about the basketball team, whether he was playing on the court or on the bench cheering his teammates on. It was a great sight to see. Left it all on the court for St. John's. Certainly wish him the best wherever he goes from here.
By all accounts, just like a great kid too. That's all you saw, whether it was from Brazil or other beat reporters, just what a great human being that he is. So there's the great clip of him jumping for joy as teammates, make baskets, bench players, and he's just you said it, just a really good teammate. So
seemed like the whole team was full of good teammates, and we know he's very, very close with Brady Dunlap. I'm wondering if maybe they look to get reconnected down the line. Sim might be looking a little bit higher than the 810 for his next landing spot, but St. Louis is a quality program. Maybe they'll look into that. But turning our focus towards Ian Jackson, today's big signing. Last year at North Carolina, 12 points a game, just under 3 rebounds, shot 40% from three, 72% from the free throw line, 46% overall. An electric scorer, a guy that's a game-changing athlete, not as tall as RJ, but I think he'll fill that void of, bringing our SportsCenter top 10 plays to the table on a consistent basis. A jumper, a runner, a flyer, some guy who can really impress the game, not only with his skills, but with his athletic ability. His 54.7 effective field goal percentage was higher than both Kadari's and RJ's last year. In fact, out of all the guys in our rotation, Zuby was the only one with a higher effective field goal percentage. So a guy who can get his points and do it effectively. But that was off the ball last year. So remains to be seen if we do put him at that lead guard spot exclusively, how he'll handle getting points for himself and the rest of his teammates.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, just an uber athlete. He's elite in transition, scores a lot at the rim, shot about 55% on shots at the rim, accounting for about 44% of his total field goals attempted. He's really, really good in the catch and shoot. Again, to your point, he was really playing off ball. So do we bring in a lead guard and allow him to continue to succeed at off ball? Or as Rick said, he's going to play a lot of point guard? To be determined. But I mean, he was really lethal at hitting corner threes, shot about 50% from each corner, accounting for about 18% of his total field goals attempted. There are some question marks about his defensive end. I was listening to a lot of UNC podcasts. That was kind of where he struggled. I mentioned previously that he kind of struggled to define a role, really got his minutes eaten into towards the end of the season. At one point, Hubert Davis went insanely small and had Ian Jackson playing essentially the 4, where he was really just standing in the corner, hitting open threes. Then towards the end of the season, struggled to really get on the court, lost his starting role. But obviously the talent's there. He's an elite talent. And, just an unbelievable acquisition. Again, 8th overall, 24/7 portal rankings. So just a great pickup.
And a New York kid who comes with a lot of fanfare, a lot of excitement. He'll have New York City high schoolers, middle schoolers excited to see him. And that's big. We just saw Malachi Smith, whatever way you want to pronounce it, I'm sorry, commit to UConn, and he credited the Kemba Walker era at UConn, for why he was growing up watching them and cheering for UConn. And St. John's needs their fair share of guys like that. Hopefully there's a Shamari Pons era of kids we'll see, and a Kadari Richmond era of kids we'll see, and then an Ian Jackson era of kids you see who grew up rooting for St. John's, seeing that it's possible to have your big names, your stardom reached here in New York City. And Ian Jackson's just our next chance at that. And plus, we want to get some guys to the pros, right? We want to have some guys getting big 7-figure checks in the NBA coming back to St. John's, showing their face, donating, their hard-earned money to help the next great St. John's player turn out to be an NBA guy as well. So Ian Jackson is just the next step in this 4-person now transfer haul. Not quite the mega haul of the newcomers that people were referencing after we already had Hopkins and Sandin already in tow, but St. John's is not done. Talks apparently have picked back up with Dylan Mitchell. Cole's very excited about that. I don't think it's anywhere close to being, a lock or if we're out in the forefront, but both teams are back in discussion about a possible fit. And now with Xavion Lee going to Florida, St. John's perhaps as a chunk of change lying around that they're willing to spend on a high-profile player like Mitchell to come in and maybe accept a role he wouldn't accept at some other places that are recruiting him currently. That's the guy you want, right, Cole?
Oh, God. If we could get him, I mean, I was a little devastated in our last podcast when it seemed like we were out of the Dylan Mitchell sweepstakes. Now to be back in again, I talked about last time the defense and what that would look like with him and Zuby on the court at the same time together, just switching everything 1 through 5 would be incredible. Like he would be an absolute cherry on top of the sundae. Perfect addition.
I agree. I do agree. The rebounding, the defensive aspect, he can change the game for us. The length, the athleticism, just a whole different piece than what we currently have, and I think would really make it easier for us to see how we can put some of these 5-man lineups together in the court. This is our updated depth chart right now. As you can see, some changes. We did away with the designation of a point guard, 2 and a 3. We've just got three Gs out there. 3 guards, Jackson, Sandin, and Sellers, forward and Hopkins, and center and Zuby. And then the bench looks pretty familiar. If you ask me, this was our bench for the major part of the second half of the season last year. Lefty at guard, Io at wing, Prey as a forward, and Vince as a 5-man. And I would absolutely go to war with those 4 guys as the majority of your bench next year. Hopefully we add 1 or 2 more pieces, but we can rely on those 4 guys. We know what we can get from those guys. And as the season went on, we got more and more comfortable with seeing Lefty, with seeing Io. And we expect big jumps from Prey. Cole is super high on Vince. I think Vince is a very suitable backup big. I do. I think that's a great guy to have as your backup center, 7 foot plus with now a year of experience. So I think the bench looks really solid. The top 5 right above them in the starting lineup, extremely talented. You could get excited about them. I am very excited about them. I think we've got as much talent as anybody. It's about seeing how that talent will best be constructed, the best lineups you can put together, and fit. Do we consider some zone defense with all that length at the guard position, but not really a typical prototypical ball stopping guard? More so the length and athleticism could lend itself to some really versatile zone defense. We didn't see that last year. Maybe we see that next year.
It's interesting looking at the roster. It's like last year's team had such an identity of not necessarily being a good shooting team, but playing tremendous defensive focused unit. This roster as currently constructed is kind of completely different. You have tons of shooters. We went from a team that struggled mightily from deep to now adding 3 guys who shot around 40% from 3, and Hopkins, who the last time he played full season shot, I think, 36%. You're going to have shooters aplenty. That's why I go back to Dylan Mitchell maybe being the perfect last piece here. Unlike the rest of the team, who is tremendous shooters now, that he would really bring that defensive identity that we're missing, I think, currently in this roster. But again, Rick Pitino, just in his ability to coach, arguably the best coach in college basketball right now, and to completely change his style of coaching year over year with a different roster is so interesting and amazing. And it's just such a gift to have. It's like, okay, yeah, like to your point, maybe we play zone. We didn't at all last year, but like Rick has that tool in his tool bag to be able to pull it out if need be.
Yep, I always have plenty of tools. I'm a big believer in Lefty. Everybody knows that. But I still think, this roster, an elite level point guard would be great, but someone like a Malik Booth would go a long way in just securing this team, a steady ball handling, facilitating guard who just knows his role as a point guard, doesn't need 35 minutes on the court, gets in, plays tough, hard-nosed defense, takes care of the basketball, gets guys in the right position, understands what it takes to be a floor general. Malik Booth was able to do that for Dwight Hardy, what we hope our next backup point guard can do for Ian Jackson or maybe someone else we bring in. I got a bunch of faith in Lefty. I'm looking forward to that jump he takes, but I think he's a very unique type of player where he's not the quickest, he's not the strongest, he's more of a taller guard, if you want to call him a pointer or shooting guard, I'm not sure, but we could use a guy who's more of a, get into the paint, jitterbug style, strong defensive approach to kind of counteract Lefty's strengths as a shooter, as a cerebral type of player.
And I think that's my biggest concern right now with the roster is not having a real true point guard. We've talked about it previously, but Kadari's ability just to calmly and collectedly bring the ball up the court under pressure, not turn the ball over. How many times would we talk about his insane box sheets? And just the most impressive thing was always the 0 in the turnover category. That is my only concern is, can we get a true point guard that will take care of the ball, create for others. You got so many guys between Sellers and Sannon, as we just talked about Jackson, that really thrive in their catch and shoot abilities. Like, can you get a real playmaking guard to come in and create for others? TBD.
Yeah, I think it's a TBT, and it is a huge question mark. I mean, I'm excited as hell for this roster and where we're going to go from here. The pundits will have us in the top 10 rankings going forward. A lot of excitement. Overall talent level looks phenomenal, but there are question marks now defensively and lineup combinations facilitating handling the ball of the highest of note. But there are some names being bandied around right now in terms of St. John's targeting some mid-major point guards to fill that hole. Two guys in particular were mentioned as visiting. Dylan Darling, a sophomore from Idaho State. He was the player of the year in the Big Sky Conference last year. 20 points, 3.5 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 36% from three. Obviously not a high-level conference, but good numbers. And then Jason Drake out of Drexler. He's visiting Thursday. He's visiting Indiana today, so he's receiving some other high major looks. 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists for him. Did have a really strong second half of the season, averaging over 15 points and close to 4 assists. Neither of these guys are high major guys. Not the guys we would have imagined 3 weeks ago as terms of our point guard targets. But, you know, if you're going to tell me we get Sannon, Sellers, and Jackson at the guard spot, it's hard to keep bringing in more and more high-level guys who expect minutes. So these are the two guys being mentioned today. Watch a little of their tape. I mean, they do some good things. Dylan is a lefty, high-level scorer. Drake looks to me like more of a combo guard, but definitely a willing and capable passer. Both these guys have 2 years of eligibility left, so maybe a little bit of room to grow. First-year backup with the promise if you play well enough, you could potentially start. But you are bringing in guys now looking at a super talented and crowded roster.
We know Pat loves his lefties. I'd be lying if I said that I knew anything about either of these guys. I haven't yet had a chance to watch tape. My concern is always guys stepping up in level of talent and competition from the mid-major level up to the Big East. You know, it's not an easy thing. Obviously, we saw guys like Jordan Dingle and Chris Ledlam struggle at times, making that a similar jump. But ultimately, you know, you laid it out perfectly. It's hard to convince an elite level point guard, which the transfer portal point guard market is very thin at this point. But it's going to be tough to convince a high level point guard kid to come in when there's not a ton of minutes available at the guard spots, you know, so this might be the type of level that you have to go. Ultimately, you trust Rick Pitino to put together the roster that he sees fit, and he'll be able to put pieces together that work. But, you know, interesting. I'm excited to see some of the tape on these guys. Obviously with Drake, you're excited that other high level programs are involved. Indiana being involved in getting him in on a visit, like that speaks volumes that other high major programs are interested. But we'll see.
And both solid free throw shooters, both solid 3-point shooters. So looking for a guy who can handle the basketball, provide some shooting, and be that rock solid floor general. It's slim pickings, unfortunately, now, but like you said, trust Rick Pitino. Just before we started, another transfer entered the portal, and I did see us linked to him, but numbers and stats aren't going to blow our fans out of the water. He's Jordan Ross from St. Mary's, another guy with 2 years of eligibility, 9 points, just under 3 assists, but did have a 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio for St. Mary's, a team that won close to 30 games. So, you know, he's well coached, well schooled. Perhaps he would have been a guy who next year at St. Mary's really blows up, and we could be looking at him prior to that happening. But those seem to be the 3 mid-major guys that St. John's is focused on right now. Maybe some of their names are popping up as we're doing this. This is the last 24 hours or so left of the portal for guys to enter in. Guys can stay in there for as long as it takes to find a spot, but we should know most of the population pool by the end of tomorrow. And then there's also the Euro market, which Rick knows well and could turn it over some stones, constantly looking for his next great Euro point guard to join the fray over here as well.
Yeah, and who knows what's going to happen in those last 24 hours of before the portal closes and no players can't come into, like, big names could pop in at any second. So this might not be the final sort of list that we have for potential point guard targets.
Yep, and then there's also, always a random coach firing in the summer, or somebody who decides to retire, and then that throws another dozen or so names into the transfer portal. So just stay on your toes if you're a St. John's fan. Be excited with the fact that we have as much talent as anybody. We'll be the talk of the Big East. Great chance that St. John's has the most talented roster in the Big East. And, this is almost what should be expected now with Rick Pitino at the helm. And those names you listed earlier, Father Shanley, Mike Rapoli, Ed Cole, okay? The powerhouse that is St. John's Athletics is just keeping on rolling. Great news today. Happy birthday to Cole. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here today?
Nah, that's it, man. Let's go Johnnies. Welcome me and
Jackson. Welcome me and Jackson. For Malik Booth, I'm Pat Kane. That's Cole Atshaw. This has been the Red Storm Rapid Reaction Podcast. Peace.